time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
Hello, welcome back to A Boring Revolution, your number one news source for everything in regards to the Boring Company. Coming to you today with a little bit of a controversial episode, I think, for some of you. I've changed my opinion on something, only a little, but I think it's a very important change, and this very, I wouldn't say it's a small change, but this very important change will help the Boring Company. There's various reasons why I think this change should happen, and I think that you'll agree once you watch the rest of this video. So this is it. Why the Boring Company should go 15% bigger. And this is in regards to the diameter of the tunnel, also the diameter of the cutter head. So before we get into it, please, if you have tuned in for the first time, like and subscribe to the channel and comment on the video if you have something useful to say. Obviously, if you don't have something useful to say and you're just going to spread some FUD, expect me to reply back to you with something not quite as, how shall I say it, nice as other YouTubers would reply to you. Because I just don't like dumb questions. Okay, so LVCC loop, Las Vegas Convention Center tunnel diameter. As you know, I've talked about the diameter of the tunnels for many years, and for this particular use case, I like this diameter. I think this works perfectly. Look at this Model X. It's a big vehicle. Lots and lots of room above the vehicle. Yeah? That's good. My criticism is that the actual space here, to the left and to the right, is a little bit limited. However, it is safe to use because, you know, people can get out of the vehicle once they open the doors. And in the new tunnels where it's got a proper road deck, obviously the vehicle can pull over to the left hand side, and you've got a good 2.5 foot to open the door and get out, and, you know, in the event of something crazy happening, like some kind of terrorist attack. So, you know, it's acceptable. It kind of passes fire eggs just by the skin of its teeth, but in an ideal world you could make some changes here. But the reason why it's the way it is simply because, number one, cost, and number two, because someone has not made the obvious decision. And if that were it, this would be a very short video, and I'd just say to you, you know what, let's just keep things as they are and just make this one small change. So let me just pull up the actual dimensions here. Unfortunately, I've not put them down in foot for my American friends, but obviously there's 300 mil to 1 foot, so if you just divide that, then you've got the answer, as it were. So the external diameter is obviously just below 14 foot. That includes the annular as well. Internally, it's in and around 3,760 millimeters, which is just over 12.5 foot. Road deck at present, as in for the LVCC loop, is 285 millimeters. That might seem like a lot, but actually it's not. And I think they should make a change here. And if you look at a Model X is a big vehicle, almost 2 meters wide, almost 1.7 meters high. And as you can see, there's a lot of room in this tunnel. You could theoretically stack one Model X on top of another if you remove the wheels of the top one, and it might possibly just fit in there in a straight tunnel. So, you know, it wouldn't actually, to be fair, that actually would not fit. But imagine you could put a small car on top of there, like a Fiat 500, for example, and that actually might fit. So it's very, very close. But the road deck design, first of all, I don't like the idea that they're using a tarmac road deck. I just don't think that's a great idea. I also don't like the height of the road deck, and I don't like the fact that there's nothing integrated into the road deck. There's no sprinklers integrated into it. There's no ventilation system integrated into it. I think rather than putting the ventilation system at the top of the tunnel, I think they should integrate it into the road deck, and then you just have your vent shafts every sort of 700-800 meters, and then you can just pump in as much air as is deemed necessary. So this is what that change would look like. So there's our current road deck at 285 millimeters. We're going to raise that way up, close to maybe 800 mil, maybe slightly less, 760 mil, something like that. So just over 2.5 foot. By doing that, you're going to increase the amount of space either side, which is great for people to potentially escape. Also, it just makes it a bit more easy to run vehicles through the system, because there's such a large gap between the walls, and you don't need to worry about clipping the side mirrors on corners and things like that, which shouldn't really happen with autonomous vehicles anyway. But something theoretically could happen. Maybe the surface gets wet and then a vehicle moves over to the side and rubs the wall. It's not catastrophic, but it's just an annoying thing. So to have an extra 400-500 mil of road deck just makes things great. And also when you're banking corners as well, it just gives you a lot more room for vehicles going around tight corners. If the radius is below 70 meters, which it might be in some rare cases. So that is the obvious change to make, and the Boring Company, I'm assuming, will use common sense and come to that decision. However, the Boring Company is not just a mass transit system. The intention is to move into other areas, and whereas this tunnel would work quite well, for example, for moving water, or maybe as a tunnel for cyclists and pedestrians, things like that, there has recently been a proposal that just didn't really match well with this particular specification and size. So what actually has changed? So there was a proposal for this here, which is our kind of freight system that the Boring Company wants to push. And as you can see, it's very tight. I ran the numbers for this, and it literally is as tight as a duck's arse. It really is. And even if it's running against all it would take is it goes around the corner slightly too hard and it rubs the top of the container, or there's some kind of surface imperfection or something like that, and that causes it to tilt. And going around corners, you're limited in terms of the radius, and it's very, very tight. And also, because it's so tight, that's going to affect the maximum speeds that you can run this freight system at. And they have proposed this kind of double system, which is just, there's so much wastage in there that I really I just don't like it. So the question is, should the Boring Company create 2 or 3 different standards for its TBMs and try and accommodate each and every client that they talk to? And I don't think that's the right answer. I think that standardization is the answer. The same with containers. All containers are around the same size, and that's what the Boring Company should aim for as well. So the freight opportunity has changed my opinion on this slightly, and I think the Boring Company should make a critical design change, which is going to make everyone very, very happy. And this is in addition to increasing the height of the road deck as well. So the height of a container is 2.43 meters, and then obviously remember you've got your transporter kind of flatbed here, which is going to be potentially 350 mil, 400 mil, maybe even more than that. You've got to integrate that into there, and it's all very, very tight. Width as well. There's lots of room here, but when you get to the corners here, let me just clear that. When you get to the corners here, it's just so very, very tight, especially for long containers when you're going around tight corners. It just doesn't work for me. So I think if something like this is going to be used in the Bering Strait, you're going to have to think about using a bigger diameter tunnel. And then the question should be, why not make every tunnel the same size and just absorb those costs, which won't be excessively, large. They will add up, obviously, but if you can still make the system run profitably, then this kind of decision makes a ton of sense. So these are kind of the core benefits. I just think that if the business makes sense economically and can make money, then what is the issue with just making the tunnel 15% bigger? We're not making it 40% bigger, we're just making it 15% bigger. Yes, that's going to result in increased amounts of spoil that we're going to have to dispose of, but in the grand scheme of things, it really helps the business case by just having a little bit more room, as it were. So my first point is this: one tunnel size, one TBM configuration, one cost per mile. You can tell every client in the world that our tunnels are X size, our tunnels are built in these configurations for whatever your use case is, and then there is one cost per mile plus any additional extras like road decks or utility systems or whatever. But it just simplifies things for the boring company, for the client, for local authorities that might be pricing this up, for private companies. All this, adds up to a nice little kind of simplification of the actual process. One tunnel equals multiple options with various vehicle types. One of the advantages of this system that I've talked about in the past is that, pretty much every Tesla vehicle can use it. And that's great because they can go into the system and they can also exit the system, so you can have a robo-taxi that uses this system to get around some congestion, and then it comes back out and it operates on the surface again as a robo-taxi. One other possible addition is that you have your specific boring company vehicle, but this vehicle only operates in the tunnels and could be a lot larger than your Model X. Now, Model X is a fairly wide vehicle, but imagine if you could have a vehicle in the system that was 2.25 meters wide. Yeah, it doesn't need side mirrors. So that would be, the actual outside dimensions there. And you can also make it taller. That would help in terms of capacity of that vehicle, because not only will it be longer, it will also be wider and taller, which will be really good for, disabled access and for getting potentially 18 seats in there, potentially even up to 20. So it opens up some new options for us. Potentially that increases the gross margins, which makes up for spending more per mile. Also, pod cars. Now, pod cars would fit in the existing tunnel, which is just over 12 foot internal diameter. However, if you had a slightly bigger tunnel and you increase the height of the road deck, you could then have some kind of wall that runs in between that separates the cars, and therefore that provides an additional layer of safety. So again, if that becomes a thing, I certainly think in countries like India and Brazil, Colombia, the Philippines, a place like that, pod cars could make a lot of economic sense for people. Cost per mile is still incredibly reasonable. There are systems in parts of the US which are getting up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 million dollars per mile, and we're, or the Boeing company as it is, we are still very low, 6.4. That's what I'm forecasting for this particular proposal I'm going to just make in a moment, is in and around 6.4 million per mile, and that potentially could come down as well as economies of scale are achieved. So I think like in the future, in the next 2 or 3 years, 6.4 million is easily achievable, so it could be less than that. Storage opportunity. So imagine if you're using this tunnel maybe to move water, or to store water, or maybe to store some kind of food products, or maybe to use hydrogen for energy. I mean, I don't know if these are good ideas for using this system, but I'm just giving you some examples there. Don't shoot me down. The storage opportunity, an extra 31% per mile, which if you're trying to store water in a drought, frequent area like California, that extra 31% makes a ton of sense. Standardization of all components equals less complexity. So one of the things that you want to do is kind of standardize how you pour in the road deck, and maybe your formwork in there, and maybe you've got some kind of standardized sprinkler system that runs along the top or the side of the tunnel, or maybe even you integrate that sprinkler system into the road deck. All those components can be standardized to this large format, rather than having 2 or 3 different formats, one for freight, one for mass transit, and it just equals less complexity, which should hopefully save the Boeing company a nice tidy sum of money in the future. So all in all, these are good things. I think as well that one thing that has kind of become apparent to me as well over the last 18 months, excuse me, is that you can actually potentially, by making a couple of key changes, by having a slightly larger tunnel than the one that's being proposed, you can actually make boring faster. And the way you do that is by having a larger tunnel that allows you to have more equipment inside the TBM, which also allows you to store more segments, and those segments in themselves can be larger. So in and a way, it actually, theoretically, obviously you'd have to prove it in practice, might be faster at boring than the previous Prufrock machine that was 14-foot external diameter. A lot of people are telling me that the sweet spot for TBMs is in and around 19 to 20 foot diameter, and that is kind of the sweet spot for cost and speed. I think it's a lot less than that, and I think that what I'm going to propose now is a better solution. So, tunnel design recommendations. This is what I would propose to the boring company and say, hey, I think you should consider this, because this is going to help the business grow. This is going to simplify things. It's going to hopefully, reduce costs in the long term, and open up the system, this tunneling system, for more use cases, increase usability. So increase the cutter head dimensions from 14 foot to 15 foot 9 inch. I think potentially that could be reduced even further, maybe to 15 foot 6 inch or 15 foot 5 inch. But for today's example, we're going to go for this, because I just think it's nice to have a little bit more wiggle room for your freight usage, just in case you need to include things in that tunnel that you didn't think you need to include for a freight system. For example, like a water suppression system, or a dry riser, or some kind of ventilation system, which you wouldn't think you'd need in a freight system, but maybe they might not be able to change the regs. So you might have to, slot that in there, which would make it a bit tight if it was 15 foot 6 inch, but at 15 foot 9 inch it would hopefully get in there nice and easy. So for my European friends, that's 4,808 millimeters external diameter. That's the external diameter, by the way, so remember the internal diameter will be around a foot less than that, maybe slightly over a foot less. So use wider concrete segments. I believe at the moment the boring company is using 1.2 meters wide. That's what I believe, somewhere in the region of 1.2 to 1.4. So I think it should be a lot wider than that. I think it potentially could go up to 1,800 millimeters, which is almost 6 foot. So exactly 6 foot, isn't it? So somewhere in the region of 1,400 to 1,700 millimeters would be perfect. That improves speed. That makes things faster. Each ring beam is much wider, therefore you're having to build less ring beams over the course of that project. So that would improve the overall speed of the system, and there's obviously less connections as well, so there's less points of failure in that tunnel lining. 3. Use larger muck trucks for faster spoil removal. Video to follow. I'm very upset about something. I'm going to bring that up in a video in the future, hopefully in the next 4 days. But I think the way to go is muck trucks. Obviously, if you've got a larger tunnel, you can increase the width of your muck trucks maybe by 180 millimeters. You increase the height of those muck trucks maybe by another 200 millimeters, and that's going to enable you to remove more spoil. And you can have multiple muck trucks that essentially live inside the TBM, and you have a conveyor belt over the top, and you fill those muck trucks and then send them to the surface. And then you every so often, every sort of 6 hours or so, you bring back all 10 muck trucks, for example. That's the way to do it. I'm going to explain that in a future video, and we need to get away from using conveyor belts because there are problems associated with that. Lengthen the TBM. A TBM can be anywhere from 150 meters long to 400 meters long. I think currently with Prufrock it's not long enough. If they increased the length of the TBM, they'd be able to store more segments in there. They'd also be able to store more spoil in temporary holding areas as well. 5, increase the curve radius to 95 meters for freight systems. So that would just be for freight. Ultimately, we don't want the top of that container rubbing against our tunnel lining, making any kind of contact there. Obviously, that would potentially cause the things inside the container to get damaged. Potentially it might damage the actual flatbed that it's on. There's a lot of issues associated with that. Potentially it could damage other equipment in the tunnel as well. So by increasing the curve radius to above 95 meters, it's just going to make things a lot safer. Also, you can go around the corners at a much faster speed, potentially over 50 miles per hour. And in the straight sections, maybe you get up to 100 miles per hour. So so I think that's definitely needs to be done. Okay, so that's kind of a proposal. This is not like, if this doesn't happen, then the Boeing company is finished. I just think this is the sensible path forward for the Boeing company. I think that kind of external dimension of 15 foot 9 inch potentially could come down. I need to run the numbers and see what's being proposed. But I think for freight, this way of doing it here is not how I would do it. Look how close they are, and it is just to build a 21 foot tunnel. You would have to have a separate TBM, which you'd have to build, and you have to build multiple numbers of them. So you end up duplicating products that you don't need, expending additional money. I think just having one tunnel size that does everything, freight, mass transit, water, cycling infrastructure, pedestrian tunnels, anything you can think of. Maybe you're running food through there in conveyor belts. It can be done in a 15 foot 9 inch tunnel. And I think that's the way forward. The cost increase is not going to be excessive. You're also going to end up with a faster TBM potentially. Also enables you to obviously store more spoil in the actual muck trucks as well. So there's all kinds of advantages going there. I think this works better. Hopefully someone at the Boeing company listens to that, or is maybe thinking about this already. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you think we should go the opposite way? Do you think we should make the tunnel smaller? Remember, if every time you make that tunnel smaller, that compresses the work area. It gets more and more difficult to bring segments into the tunnel. You have to flip those segments around and then install them. You think that it would make sense to make tunnel TBM smaller, but in matter of fact, it actually compresses the work area, makes things a whole lot more difficult. And I think the sweet spot is in and around 15 to 16 foot, based on what I'm reading. Potentially larger than that as well. But I think for the Boeing company, in terms of keeping costs low, 15 to 16 foot is the kind of perfect number. Okay, thank you for watching that. Hope you enjoyed it. Please consider following me on Twitter, and consider supporting me on Patreon for just $2. We also have a great Discord channel, which is totally free. You can go in there. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. Just come in there. I'm always in there. Have a chat with me. That would be amazing. Get to know each other. We talk about all topics, including the Boeing company, the various projects, and of course Tesla and a little bit of SpaceX as well. So everyone is welcome. Just please ask good questions. Don't spread FUD. Thank you. Okay, I've got my Patreons as well. Incredible. I'm going to be making a major investment in this channel in the coming, what should we say, 1 to 3 weeks. Just got to do a few things before I do it. You're going to see that improvement very soon. And the reason that improvement has been made is because of all these people, plus a couple of other people who supported me in the beginning. All these very, very wonderful people are helping me improve this channel. I keep saying that, but I'm going to make the big investment in the next 1 to 3 weeks, and everyone's going to see it. And hopefully, if you like that change, you'll consider supporting me as well, because I have much bigger plans for this channel, including a bit of a tour of the US, and maybe some really quite fascinating interviews with people that I've kind of struck up a really good working relationship with over the sort of last 2 years or so. So that's incredible. I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of a long video, but I'm sure you learned a lot. Thank you for joining me. And remember, don't be boring. I will see you on the next one. Good night all. Take care. Thank you and goodbye.